We're going to move on now to the BeActive box. How many actually have a BeActive box? And we'll call it a BeActive box, but it may be some other sort of sensory box or sensory area, or perhaps a sensory tent. Any of you using that kind of? A few? Great. Thank you. Well, for those who don't or haven't come across it before, this was the RNIB's version of Lilli Nielsen's Little Room, to give you the background. Lilli Nielsen had a very sophisticated version of this, and I have to say much more expensive. And the RNIB had this produced in Britain, which is a lot cheaper. And is used for babies who have very limited vision. And it's giving them a wee secure environment to start their play life, if you like. So we'll work our way through this. So why use it? We've looked at it there. It's a safe, secure environment in a busy situation. So if your child is in this, be it in a house with other children running around, in a house with pets, in a busy nursery, they know that they're safe when they're put in here. And I'll say put in here, you actually put the child down and slide the box along. You're not going to stick the child in a box, but you slide the box over. That when they're there and this around them, they're safe and secure, ready to explore by themselves without anybody else interfering. It's unchanging. So if something was there a minute ago, it's still going to be there. And Granny hasn't lifted it to give a wee shake and put it down at the other side, or somebody hasn't stolen it, or the dog hasn't run away with it. If it was there 10 seconds ago or 2 minutes ago, it's still hanging there. It stimulates movement, and we'll go into that in a greater deal, and it allows independent play. The child is allowed to do what they want to, when they want to, without any adult interference. I think it's really important that we use this kind of environment as a really good vehicle for observation, because if the child is lying with the BeActive box, or whether it be a sensory tent or whatever, they're there independently playing, using what movement they have, and it's a really good point where to observe. You're not having to do anything. It's difficult to observe if you're playing with the child. And if mum's playing with the child, you're not quite sure what's coming from the child and what's coming from mum. And it's a good way of observing the child on their own. So the kind of things you're looking at, which hand do they reach up with? What movement are they using? Are they just sort of vaguely feeling around, or are they grasping something and banging it? Or is it something that can be pushed, like the button for a toy that has to be pushed? Is there something that's a favourite? Do they always go back to something, no matter when they use the BeActive box? Do they always go back to the same toy? Which hole was it in? Because they are numbered, or you can number them, they are numbered. So was it always there when the child went to it? Were two hands used together at any time, or are they using each hand independently? Initially, I would not change the materials for a long time. You would leave the same materials in the same position so that the child got used to this environment, knew that if they reached out the right hand, there was going to be something there, same with the left hand, or above their head, because things can hang down from above. So it would be unchanging to begin with.
Lorna, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What age range are you talking about for using a resource like that, do you think?
From birth and up, really until they're too big for the box.
Okay.
I mean, it gets to a stage where they can't stretch out their hands, so really, and that's normally about 2, something around that. Maybe some older children might be able to do it. But then, having said that, I'm thinking there about the BeActive box, but you could move this to be a tent, you know, one of the play tents.
Yeah, that's right.
And that way it could be whatever size the child is.
Yeah.
If it's a child with complex difficulties, it could be a lot bigger, and just the same ideas. Another observation, are the feet used singly or together? What are the feet doing? And I would always take the child's shoes and socks off to use this, and make sure that there are materials under the feet lie them on something, be it crinkly paper, a towel, a fur coat, but something that's going to give them some sensation under their feet. And what do they do? Do they just bang their feet on it? Do they slide up and down to get sensation? Is there a favourite material that they really like? And this obviously would come after a long while of changing things over. Shoes on or off, but I would always have the shoes off. Does auditory feedback influence the choice of materials? So are they only choosing things that make a noise? Are they not interested in the tactile qualities, or vice versa? Does it influence response? Does it change the response? Is there a verbal response, an auditory response? Do they make any kind of noise when they're in this environment? Is there any change during or after the session? So does it calm them down? And I've found that in loads of cases. Are they much calmer when they're in this environment, or when they come out of it? Do they show displeasure when they're removed, or the box is removed? Are they more vocal while they're in the box? I'll just say in the box, you know what I mean. Is there any more vocalization than normal? Does it show any strong dislike of any material? Feedback from the material. If you're choosing your materials, you want to make sure you have some materials that give a visual feedback, and that could be some Christmas lights strung up at one side. It could be a light switch, you know, the ones you get for putting in a cupboard that just glue on. Where you just touch the dome and lights up. Is there an auditory response to, are they getting bells, whistles, whatever, rustling, banging? Or are you putting the materials in for a tactile feedback? Is it fur you're putting in or whatever? So varying the materials that you're using so that you're getting various feedbacks. If the child was using the box for maybe several weeks, and they always went to the same piece of material, and it seemed that it was really the material they liked, then I would move the material to another part of the box, and then as an observation, find out if they explored with their other hand, or if they would just then continue to play with whatever was on the right-hand side, making sure that they were guided towards that to start with, and knew that was there. So there would be a purpose in moving, to encourage use of the other hand, and also to introduce new materials, because you don't want it to be a stagnant environment. You want to introduce new materials to give the child new experiences for whatever feedback you're requiring. And introduce materials which encourage new movements. If it's a child who's been banging and you want them to use some finer movement, perhaps a squeezing movement or just a grasping, then you would make sure there were materials there that encouraged this new movement that they were ready. So that's why, again, this is something you would use in conjunction with your journal, looking at what sort of movements you were wanting to be seeing next. So if you want to see these movements, you need to give materials that will encourage that movement, whether it be some fine motor skill, like squeezing or pinching. So observe regularly, observe systematically. So if you're a penny teacher going in on a regular basis and this child is using this kind of environment, then one of your visits just put down to observe for maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the very most. Observe systematically. What is it you're observing? Are you watching their hand movements, their feet movements? Are you listening for vocalization? Note down what it is you're observing before you start, so that you know to note each thing. Don't allow the child to become bored, and don't use it as a babysitter, but as a learning situation. And it can become a really useful piece of material then. And again, I refer to the BeActive box, but it could be a sensory tent. It could be some sort of, these boxes are quite expensive, but I think I've been in 3 different nurseries where I loaned one, and within a couple of weeks, a dad or a grandpa or an uncle had made one for the nursery. So even if you have one in your kit that you can introduce to a nursery. And sometimes nurseries fundraise for themselves or are willing to buy one for themselves. So it's not necessary for you to have one for every child you ever visit. One will be enough.